Welcome back, everybody. I almost wanted to start this like Tim starts his crawl space night. Whoa, I did like a big pause. That means you have to do Lance's British voice. Welcome, everybody, to Behind the Couch. I'm Dr. Shiloh. I'm here with Dr. Scott. It's a Saturday afternoon, and the bells are chiming somewhere. Thank you, Jason. Thanks for being here, guys. We are doing a little live stream, and you can find all these live streams at our YouTube channel, which is linked to our gorgeous new website that just went live last night. And if you can't tell, we're super excited about it because I put it all over social media today.
I got to tell you, it's way better than it's way better than I thought we would have been able to get. Like, it's so much more than I expected.
It's so much stuff, but that's like in a good way. And I really wanted it to be easy to navigate and have you guys find every single guest episode we've ever done and have it linked straight to that. So you can go there and listen on all of our friends' platforms and all the people that ever came on Behind the Couch, be able to have a link to their stuff and just appreciate the community that we're a part of and the fun things that we've been able to do. I mean, it's been nearly 4 years. So we have a lot of stuff to put on there, which was kind of cool to look back at the live events. Remember those? But please look at it. It's beautiful. Thank you, Rebecca Sebastian, for connecting us with our webmaster / Squarespace whisperer. She's amazing.
Yeah.
So we are, didn't have, anything formal planned today. We thought because we just did a listener question episode, we had a ton of Patreon members that asked us some questions sort of after we had already planned and then after we had recorded. So we pulled your questions that you had sent in and we're going to answer those. If anyone wants to ask a question, I guess we could do it on the spot. I'll just leave the spots open. Feel free to grab a spot. What else? Oh, new Patreon members. Hang on. Let me look at my outline here. Duh. Okay, so we have 3 new Patreon members since the last time we met a couple weeks ago. So we would like to say a big ol' thank you to Dana W., Jetta, and Master Deco. So thank you guys for signing up and being a part of the family.
And we have one in the witness protection program that can't be named. So
we do.
I'm deciding they're in witness protection program.
I think that's
totally
a great story.
Work for our podcast.
I love
totally
it.
Makes sense.
I love it. It's a great narrative. Let's run with it.
Yeah.
So we hope you all are doing well. We see you guys in the chat and over on Facebook. I don't know if this is streaming to Twitter anymore. It used to. I think it got disconnected somewhere along the way. But
I don't know.
I mean, come on. We got other things we're doing. So, Scott, do you want to start us off today? You bring in some.
I kind of do.
To Behind the Couch today.
I've had 3 jugs of iced tea.
Nice.
To kind of gently calm me down. Jugs. So look, this is one of the things that happened with the listener questions is like we created this big spreadsheet when we were prepping this episode because we had so many questions over the past couple of years that really needed some attention to them from our listeners. And I have to say, by and far, our listeners are always so great, and we talk about how they educate us or correct us on things, which is so great. And then there's other times where people just want to offer an opinion, and opinions are opinions. There's a lot of fluidity in the definition of the word opinion as well. Yep. And somebody got, and let me frame this by saying, I respect respectful conversation.
Yep.
I so much do.
We do.
And I want to explain a comment that I made that ticked somebody off. And I want to ask everybody that listens to this, all of our wonderful, wonderful supporters and Patreons who would probably be part of an army for us if they wanted to, because you're also wonderful.
You called him a cult last time.
Yeah, I love it. I want to be a cult leader. I don't want anybody to pile on this person if by some chance their comments ever become public, like it's not on Twitter.
Yeah, we're not about that. Yeah, like I don't even like posting the shitty reviews and stuff and saying like, what's up with this person? They do not need any of my attention or effort.
No,
really.
Exactly. And you know what? We're not for everybody. I understand that. So anyway, the comment that came in recently was, I think about 2 episodes ago, I mentioned Reagan, former president, deceased California Governor Ronald Reagan, and I called him an asshole. And somebody really took offense to that. And, and they gently challenged me about where I stand politically. I think probably, most people that would know I'm pretty far left, more so than most people I grew up with. And I still have conversations. I have great relationships with people across the political spectrum. But this one got me really fired up in a way that I feel like needs some attention, because I'm of an age and a generation where I really saw decades of the wreckage that this particular politician wrought across many different domains of our society. So you can disagree with me, and you can like him as a person or like him for his charm. But there are some big reasons why I had that really strong opinion of him. And so I wanted to go over those, and I took a lot of notes, because of course I'm like Kermit on the typewriter doing this. So there are 3 particular reasons in descending order of why Reagan's tenure in politics affected me personally and continue to affect me personally today. And I want to explain those. Like, all of these are backed up with stats. Mm-hmm. All of it's backed up with research. I'm not lying. I'm not exaggerating anything. This is just what it is. No matter where you fall on the political spectrum. The main thing that affects my day-to-day work is Reagan shut down the state of California mental health hospital system. And now, he was supported by a case that was going through the ACLU of a person who had been involuntarily hospitalized at a California State Mental Hospital for quite some time. But that was one small part of it. The big part of it was that Reagan was very fiscally conservative. And this is one thing that I will give him, is that our state hospital system cost the majority of the state budget at that particular time in history. But that's not the reason that you take something apart that's needed and then don't do anything. And so prior to his actions, the state system housed long-term chronically mentally ill, as well as those people that felt like they were not doing well. They would check themselves in so that they could actually get treatment and rehabilitation and stabilization. So there was a span of diagnostic severity, but it was a real option for so many people on so many different levels. Like I said, there was a legitimate concern, so it was really a significant part of the budget. It cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Back then, 40 years ago, that was a very big deal. Overall, the system was very poorly run, like most government agencies.
Right.
But it had really poor oversight. It was also actually quite primitive compared to the way we would look at psychology and rehabilitation today. But there was still programming. It kept people safe. It kept people who were really severely mentally ill off the streets. But instead of fixing it, he adopted this stance that really the community should be serving the individuals, along with the statement that the mentally ill would be better off with their families.
And what does that mean?
Exactly.
That we should be taking them into our homes, and we're not any more equipped to do that than an entity with professionals?
Exactly. And what it did was it put the onus on the families at a time when there was not a lot of education. There was this pre-internet. People didn't know a lot about mental illness.
Yeah.
What was available might be available to some people that knew where to go get information, and there were plenty of people that didn't know. The other thing was that they dumped all these people back out into the community, and the cities and the counties were now supposed to take care of it with programs. So it's like the same cost existed. It just now went to city and county responsibility rather than being the state's. So it shifted the burden to cities and counties. They were completely unprepared for it. So because they were unprepared, what happened? All of those people, I mean, I am exaggerating there. The vast majority of those people became homeless.
Yep.
So it began to burden the cities and the states and the cities and county and state in a different way. So it significantly increased our homeless population, especially the portion of the mentally ill population. It did not take into consideration individuals that are hospitalized for extremely long periods of time, that their outcomes were actually determined that they needed long-term contained treatment and possibly what we call social habilitation, like people being taught as adults the rudimentary skills of living. For developmental disability or other challenges, they couldn't get it in the same period that someone who was neuronormative or non-mentally ill. So completely didn't look at that. And it just, here's the other thing, is that it set into motion a complete domino cascade across the United States, where every state started dismantling their state mental hospital system, which
I didn't know that.
It did. Like every state started echoing, like, hey, look how much money we can save. We can just put them out and their family. They can
California did it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was the one. So that's one of the reasons. I mean, on one hand, it's one of the reasons I have a job. I mean, it supports like why I'm employed, but the amount of suffering to individuals and families is immeasurable. We will never know what the other alternative could have been. Now,
and we wonder why the issue of the epidemic of homelessness is the way it is right now. You know, it's like a complete shutdown in the 80s without anything in place to take that burden. And now we're trying to play catch up decades later. Man. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like, how do you put that genie back in a bottle? I don't know how you do that. Briefly, Reaganomics completely broke the middle class. We had post-World War II, the most successful, thriving middle class economy in the world that gave, this was a time where industry was booming, the economy was booming, and a sort of a nuclear family of, 2 adults and 2 children, one person could work and support the entire family, have a quality of life, whether they were working, because there were so many union jobs going on. And that Reaganomics, which was supposed to let's cut taxes on all the rich, all the corporations, and all of that wealth is just going to trickle down to the middle class, and they're going to have more money than they ever did. And it absolutely did not. It has been proven over and over again by every economist in the world that didn't work. So without going into that, just mentioning that it literally destroyed like a nuclear blast Detroit, because one by one, all of the auto manufacturers just couldn't make it work anymore. Now, did the labor unions have something to do with it? Yeah. I'm part of 5 unions. I'm a member of 5 unions. There's some crazy shit going on in unions. But for the most part, it's the reason we have weekends. It's the reason we have vacations. It's the reason we have insurance. So there's that one. Now here's number 1. Number 1 for me is that I came of a young adult age at a time when HIV appeared on the scene. And to the point where I remember going for a checkup in Birmingham, Alabama, when I was a sophomore in college at Birmingham Southern. And this doctor was doing the intake, and he was, asking questions. And he goes, I mean, I have to ask this question, but are you sexually active? I'm like, yeah, I'm sexually active. He goes, and I'm like, sorry, I don't mean to be offensive, but this is just my question. But like, do you ever have sex with men? I was like, yeah, I'm gay. Can't you tell? I'm wearing a pink button now. Come on. Thinking it was kind of a joke. And so this guy like shut down on me.
Oh, I bet.
He, this was Alabama and a long time ago. And the one thing that he did though for me is he said, Scott, there's a disease that doesn't even have a name yet, and millions of people are going to die.
Oh my gosh.
We don't know what's going on. It's in New York. It's in San Francisco. It's in Los Angeles. It has not hit Atlanta yet. We've seen some in Chicago. It is causing a cancer. It's causing all sorts of things. All we know is you have to wear a condom.
Wow.
That's all we know is we have to wear a condom. It terrified me. But
what a moment in time. Oh.
Right. But it's the reason I'm alive, because I went back to the dorm. I went back to our shared, tables at Snavely dining hall at Birmingham Southern. I was like, guys, my doctor just said this and this and this. And everybody was like, oh, that'll never happen here. And then, half of those people were dead within like 6 years.
Wow.
So Reagan, as president, completely ignored the HIV epidemic. Nancy was a big part of it too. They were absolutely did not care. There are actual recordings of reporters asking the White House press secretary, what do you think of the gay cancer that's happening, and it's taking people's lives? And the press secretary starts laughing. And everybody was just kind of shrugging it off. There's a documentary, if anybody's interested in it. It's called When AIDS Was Funny, and you can hear the recording of Reagan's press secretary laughing about the number of deaths that were piling up. So our administration was incredibly slow on the response. And because it was gay men who were the victims, it just one barrier after the other as far as getting medications. But guess who was the one who spearheaded the medications coming through?
Dr. Fauci.
It was Dr. Fauci. He's been around that long.
Yeah. And
he was the one at the forefront. And he kind of butted heads with an organization called ACT UP, which was like a radical. It's like they were the gay Antifa.
I remember them.
But they were like, Antifa was like baby aspirin compared to these guys. They were actual activists, and it was drag queens, and it was lesbians, it was everybody, and they were like massive protests, taking over halls, laying down. There was no violence, but they really protested a lot. And finally they were able to come to terms with what Fauci was trying to do, and he had to educate, like, this is the way science works, and this is what we know, and this, anyway. So
wow, it's like history
that's 10 minutes
itself.
Of me ranting, and thank you for listening to me. So that's why Reagan was an asshole.
It's horrific, and I've been following some comments over here. Some people are quite educated on this, some people not. Rebecca says appalling. I mean, it all is it, but it also gives me goosebumps in a way that history repeating itself of, it being ignored, of people thinking that won't happen here.
Yeah.
It's there is no other real health epidemic that we can compare to, except for that as a nation. Now everybody's impacted. And I know you and I talked about this way back when last year, just when you were talking about the fear of mask fatigue for folks because of the ways in which the trends went during the AIDS epidemic.
With condom fatigue.
Right. And that was a thing. And man. So yeah, that's a comment, and I think if you listen to us enough and you know us, like you said, you do know that piece about us and what our views are on things. And especially in this last year, I mean, it's just been, we can't ignore some of the topics that are going on, but it's also our podcast. We're not teaching a class. This is not our work. We can talk about us and our views and what we think and what's going through our tiny brains. So, we don't hold we're not representing someone else in a way that we shouldn't, in air quotes, be political in any way. And not that I think that we are, I just think it comes through every once in a while. And that really, I see that on a ton of other podcast comments. People just don't like that. Some people just don't like that. And that's totally, I get it. Like there's weird things that I don't like that I'm sure I've chosen not to listen to podcasts because of it.
Yeah. I think also the saddest thing is how, we are at a very politically divisive time and people are not reaching across the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I think it's with some of the people that are in office right now, is it worth reaching across the aisle to crazy horsehead from North Georgia? I don't think so. I just don't think so.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's something that I wanted to respond back to something Shannon said, and
Okay.
Rebecca, thank you so much for your very kind comment. I tried to find that doctor for years. I tried to remember his name, but it's also why I wrote my dissertation, and I dedicated my dissertation to this doctor that I cannot remember his name, despite the fact that he clearly was not welcoming or understanding of my sexuality.
I didn't know you dedicated it to him.
I did.
Oh my gosh.
He saved my life. And
wow.
There were 2 or 3 people that I scared the shit out of them, and they were careful, and they're still here today because of it. So
yeah.
But Shannon was saying, I heard some brief history of the Spanish flu epidemic, and the attitude was going on back then. It's frightening, just like the Spanish flu, and like the story of what went on. I think in St. Louis, they were if you compare in 1919, Chicago and St. Louis, one of the cities was like, "Fuck this, we need to get commerce going again," and they had the hugest die-off. So yeah, history repeats itself.
Sure it is. We need to learn. All right.
Stupid is and stupid does.
All right. Should we get into some questions?
Let's get into some fun questions now. Yes.
Fun. Well, I don't know if they're all fun, but we got some like anti-abortion terrorism stuff coming up. Oh. Just get ready, guys. But okay, so the first one is from our dear Shannon, and she asked, what fictional character from a movie, TV show, or book do you identify with? And she adds that her guess is that neither of us will say Hannibal Lecter. I don't know. Are you that sure, Shannon? Are you that sure? Go first, Scott. I'm interested to hear about yours.
I have a couple that I thought that was like a really great question, by the way. I think that, for one, it's a sort of a seminal motion picture for, the 80s, was Stand By Me, based on the Stephen King novella. And I really, I remember seeing it and just thinking that the character of Will Wheaton, who played Gordy, and he felt like an outsider at home. He felt unseen not because his parents were bad or anything, but just because they were really taken up with other things.
Yeah.
And he became a creative person. He became a writer. And I don't know if I'm a writer or not at this point in my life, but I really sort of resonated with that character. And then the other one is from a more fantastical Tim Burton movie called Big Fish.
I love that movie.
The character Edward Bloom that was played by Ewan McGregor, because my dad was the biggest liar in the world. And he was everything was a huge dramatic story, and he was an amazing storyteller, but you would have to divide by 12 to get to the real
the truth, the nugget of truth.
The truth of the story. And then I was going to say on top of it, like a book that or a movie that I kind of identified with both characters in a way was Brokeback Mountain.
Oh,
because I thought it was, for one thing, it's Ang Lee, who's an unbelievable director. The movie, portraying this affair and this love between two men at a time and a place, is a special moment in time, but it's also, I realized as I was watching the movie that I knew these guys. Like there was no keeping me in the closet by the time I was like 18 or 19 years old. It just wasn't going to happen. But there were other people who didn't have either I don't want to call it strength, because I didn't see it as a strength. I just saw it as like, I'm not able to contain who I am.
The support.
I just felt so badly for these two characters. And I thought, oh my God, this guy would be alive. You know, Heath Ledger's character lives at the end. And I was like, he would still be alive today. He would be just about my age and alone. And I just thought that was so tragic and artfully done.
Yeah. Anne Hathaway's in that, isn't she?
Yes, but you don't see her face, so you don't have to do that.
You don't see her face. All right. Okay. I picked one. It was kind of a teen one, and then also adult. Probably, this was a hard question for me. And just like who would I pick to play myself? I don't know why these are like so hard for me to identify with someone. So for kind of a teen version of myself, and not fully, I'll explain, but is the character Missy, played by Eliza, it's actually Dushku from Bring It On. So she's like the reluctant one.
Missy is the poo.
Because so I wasn't like goth like her, had a chain wallet or anything when I was like busting out my back handsprings, which I couldn't do. So that was a bad reference, but I was
on top. What she say? She had like, I was in gymnastics, and we don't have that here.
Yes.
Something like that.
Definitely the snarkiest of all of them.
Yeah.
But and my parents will attest to this, that I loved dance. And so joining our dance team, they were song leaders as well, which means we had to cheer at the games. And I was constantly getting in trouble for not paying attention to when we were doing our cheers at the football game, because I was turned around watching the football game, because I was way more interested in that and in my dance competitions on the weekends. I did not want to be standing on that stupid box in that stupid sweater doing those stupid cheers. I just wanted to dance. So yeah, I mean, I think I was her, not to the degree, but I definitely wasn't Torrance. So
Torrance.
The other person I picked, and you know what I remember this from? Do you remember a few years ago on Facebook, probably several years ago, where it was like a thing to pick like 3 different characters, and they were kind of a mishmash of you, and you just like put up the pictures, right? So I remember this is one of the characters I picked because at the time it was the shit. But it's Carol from The Walking Dead, Melissa McBride. And not
She's
that like
amazing.
You know, of course, Carol's backstory is, you know, much different than mine in being this victim of this horrible abusive husband. But I would do whatever in the apocalypse to survive. And Carol is like, she's the quiet observer, and then she can fake like she's the, you know, little lady that's not going to cause any trouble, and then she will fucking kick your ass and chop your head off too. So I feel like I could be a Carol in the apocalypse. Like I definitely am an observer. I'm definitely a person in the background, but yeah, I aspire to be her when that day comes.
Yeah, I love everything about that character. I love everything about that story. I love that she was in, you know, that she was actually a side character and was not supposed to survive. And
she's still in it.
And that the audience responded so well to her that it just took off. And I love it. She was like a local casting director that was doing sort of the extras and supporting roles for stuff that was shot in Atlanta. And she
oh my gosh, that's
submitted
a cool
herself.
story.
It's like, and now I like, her character choices are amazing. She's like this quiet. And then, oh God, remember when they were at Terminus with the cannibals?
Yes,
and she, like, she basically sets up a whole trap around the perimeter on her own. Oh my
Yep.
God, it's just the greatest story. And
I
then
know, she's so smart.
Negan fucked the whole story up, and I stopped watching.
And he's still in it too. I just watched the trailer for season 11, and I was like, gosh. Yeah, that's when I dropped off too. And like back, Shannon, to your Silence of the Lambs reference, I mean, I think an obvious thing would be for me to say that, you know, Clarice Starling is someone I aspire to be. I don't think I identify with her, but there are moments. And I was thinking about that moment where she's at the academy and she gets in the elevator and she's just like the tiniest person in there, and it's all these big dudes standing with her, and she's just like looks up and like, okay, where are we going? And I definitely still have those moments. You know, I was addressing a SWAT team the other day, and out of a room of 60 people, I was the only woman in that room. And it's I still have definitely moments in which I identify. So just full circle back to your Hannibal Lecter comment.
Yeah.
So Rebecca, did you see Rebecca's comment? She said, now, can you guys tell me your final meal? Like if you were on death row, because she asked us this question and we interpret it as, what was your last meal?
Yeah, I completely like, oh yeah, I had pasta last night or whatever we said.
Thai food. You had Thai food. So that's easy for me. Breakfast burritos. I would definitely have one with chorizo in it because I don't eat meat anymore. So I fully would have chorizo. Has to have some good crispy potatoes or hash browns in it. And then for dessert, this doesn't exist anymore. And I went there recently because my daughter wanted to go, but Olive Garden had the best cheesecake like in the 90s. It was just a regular cheesecake, and then it had a thin layer of dark chocolate on the top.
Ooh, nice.
And it was amazing. And my mom would buy it for my birthday. She would get an entire Olive Garden cheesecake. So I'll have that for dessert before they put me in the electric chair or whatever they do now. What about you, Scott? Kind of a depressing question when you think about it.
There's some things like, I mean, like I've said before, my husband is this freakishly talented cook. Like everything is. Great. So it's hard. Yes. But like if there was a way that I could have as my last meal something that no one else has ever done this, been able to do this meal, is my mother's chicken pot pie. Oh. And it was unlike anything. I mean, you know, chicken pot pie is great. I mean, it's hard to. Oh yeah. I mean, it's good, but it would be a chicken that she had, cooked. You know, it wasn't like it was canned or prepared chicken or anything like that. And the crust was a biscuit dough crust that would just turn this. And of course, it was all with like Crisco. So like the texture of it was just this unbelievable. So, I mean, they wouldn't be able to, that unfortunately that recipe is lost to the world. But yeah,
nobody has it.
Nobody had it.
That's awful. What's that wonderful thing that Dan makes for New Year's?
The cassoulet?
Yes, that would be a good one.
That takes 3 days to make.
Oh
my God. He gets a duck and he renders the duck fat from the duck.
Yeah.
And then like cooks like the beans, and it takes 3 days. It's a 3-day process of cooking. And it's like you can only eat like this much.
Yeah.
Because it's so super rich.
Yeah, I would eat it. I would break my food rules for that for sure. Once a year. I ate bacon when I was with Rebecca in New York, and that was on accident, but it was. I took a bite. I was like, what? This is an Impossible Burger. Why would they put bacon on it? And I was like, well, fuck it. I'm eating the rest.
So there's a restaurant right down the street too called Spartina that has a dish that is handmade tortellini stuffed with spare rib meat in a brown butter sauce. That's like, I like every time I go, it's like, I will not get it again. I've had it 3 times. I've got
to get something different. We are all starving now, I'm sure.
I know. I'm like, now it's like, oh, I really need food.
Okay. So this
question.
This was just basically a comment and a response to something someone else had another question that was submitted that we covered on the episode. So Lauren B, who's one of our Patreon members, she said, I wanted to comment on one of the listener questions regarding asking for recommendations from online forensic psychology master's programs for APA doctoral programs. I recently completed one from Purdue Global and had amazing professors that were clinicians in the field. They absolutely were supportive and wrote letters of recommendations for me. I'm now entering a PsyD program this fall. I will say you may need to ask several times to get them, but it's absolutely worth it. Also, several professors work in corrections. The Federal Bureau of Prisons is what it's called here in the US. So if listeners are looking for those folks to learn from, the Federal Bureau of Prisons is having a huge hiring push for people under the age of 37. There's a mandatory retirement age basically in the federal system. So you actually can't get hired after the age of 37. So check out their website, which is usajobs.gov. And she said there's positions available for all levels of education. I spent so many hours on usajobs.gov when I was about to graduate. There are fascinating jobs in psychology all around the nation. I mean, everywhere. I was considering some crazy stuff like the National Forestry Service has psychologists. All of the military, if you want to be a military psychologist or work at the prisons, it's actually just kind of a fascinating website to look through and see like, oh, this one's in at the Pentagon, like just crazy stuff. But that's great advice. And I'm so awesome. Thank you, Lauren. I mean, I'm so happy you're going to be contributing to our field and entering your program. And thank you for helping out our other listener that wrote in.
So one thing, this is going to be such a left-hand comment on this question, but I want to share it with people. And I know that thankfully this is probably going to be extremely rare, but I now have 3 acquaintances. One who was pursuing a master's in social work, completed a master's in social work. The other one got a master's in clinical psych, so they can work in order to work as an MFT. And one was 2 years into their doctoral program, their PhD doctoral program. All 3 of these people had challenging lives before they made these career changes. These were second and third careers. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing that all 3 had in common. They all had minor felonies.
Okay.
And no one at the schools asked them or told them when they were enrolling that you cannot license in the state of California in any mental health professional capacity as a social worker, an MFT, or a psychologist if you've had a felony. It's a done deal. Yeah. Like people have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in massive court cases to challenge it. You're not budging.
Wow.
Unless you can get your record expunged, which is almost as impossible to
especially
do.
As an adult. Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing. Ashtar, exactly. All that training, all that. And then so you're ending up being at minimum $50,000, $60,000 in debt, if not 5 times that amount, and not able to license. Now, there are careers, there are jobs you can do with those degrees that don't require you to, license as a mental health professional, but you're still kind of working in the field. But they're not really the kind of jobs that people pursue when you're pursuing these kind of education. So,
and it's not going to pay what a licensed job is going to pay, and you're paying those loans back. It's going to be tough.
Exactly, and it's. I would also say that it's really important. I wish schools had that first thing. Don't enroll in this program if you have a felony, or on the intro,
or just a checklist, like a checklist for you to go over. It's not that they have to ask you, but I mean, I wasn't pursuing licensure when I enrolled, and so I didn't do all that homework on my own.
Right.
Obviously, it didn't matter for me, but you got to do. That's what Scott and I say every time we talk to someone about looking into their school and looking into licensure. It's like you have to do the homework all the way through. I tell people, start at your goal and then work backwards. What degree do you have to have? How do you get licensed? All of that. because it's going to be on you. It really is. Ask the questions and find out. So that's so sad. It's awful.
Yeah.
Okay, so Amelia, who is also a Patreon member, said, what is your psychological lens or take on anti-abortion terrorism, as well as just religious terror as a whole? And where does religious zeal transfer into terror and violence? I am a clinic escort at my local women's clinic and deal with a lot of wondering if an already possibly mentally unstable individual could use religion as a justification to enact violence. Amelia, thank you for that service that you're doing, first off. So I very lightly sort of reviewed this when we did our Get Vocal on domestic violence extremist. Did I just say domestic violence? That's not what I meant. Domestic
terrorism.
And there were 5 typologies, and one of them was abortion-related violent extremists. So essentially, I just gave a simple definition of it being based on ideological agendas in support of pro-life, or technically, people can be on the pro-choice side and enact violence, but that doesn't fall under anti-abortion. And there is very, very little of that. I was reading a document today where the FBI acknowledges it, but that there's not a lot of violence associated with the other side of the issue, I guess. It's defined as a single issue act of terrorism. The anti-abortion movement can really be broken up and divided into 3 sections: mainstream, militant, and then extremists. So extremists is what we're talking about here. And that wing is constituted by those anti-abortion activists who advocate, threaten, or use violence against those who provide or receive or support abortion. So it's done with the intention of intimidating or injuring or killing these targets in order to deter them or other people to end the practice and availability of abortion. So such violence typically includes bombings, arson, assassination, just murder, assault, death threats, kidnapping, vandalism, and burglary. So they might break into a clinic and do some property damage. But there's really this sort of twisted rationalization where we're talking about the murder and the assaults and the bombings of saving a life by taking a life. And so that's some, as Dr. Scott would say, mental gymnastics going on there. Not that that's a clinical term for you, Amelia, asking this question, but it gives you a little bit of insight into what's going on. There's a number of organizations associated with anti-abortion violence, such as Army of God, who's been responsible for hundreds of attacks and bombings on clinics, the American Coalition of Life Activists, and another organization called Missionaries to the Preborn. But typically, violent attacks on abortion providers are committed by lone individuals or lone wolves. So think like Eric Rudolph, the man responsible for the Olympic bombing in Atlanta. He also targeted some other establishments, including gay and lesbian establishments, but abortion clinics as well. And a few of his murders were in those circumstances. But these are really people who are on the fringes of the movement or are in the more extreme outside groups. So similar to what we see with any other domestic terrorist who acts out in violence to get their message across, we're seeing this particular person, for whatever reason, being fueled by the literature, by the echo chamber of the internet now these days in recent times. We don't really see severe or major mental illness issues with the people who act out in violence with their ideologies. And we don't see, if they do have maybe a more mild
one.
Right. Well, and we don't, with those that act out, we don't even see a mild or moderate mental illness that is like across the board. People are working with different things, but it's always being fueled by that ideology, whether they're an incel, whether they're the Unabomber, mass shooters. We see, depending on the age, especially when they're adolescent, we are seeing some commonalities there, but there's not one mental illness issue, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that is like across the board with these individuals. So it's more about the perceived grievance, the perceived helplessness about that nothing's being done. And that all surges, they're acting out in violent ways as the only way in which they see to get attention for the cause, along with a lot of times that false belief that it's going to change something, rather than people just being horrified and considering them a monster. So it's hard to put a thumb on like exactly what's going on, but no, it's not that like mentally unstable person in the community that you have to be aware of or scared of that is going to be the one to snap, because we know that doesn't happen. Interestingly, in my research, I was finding that in the mid 80s that the FBI director at the time, William Webster, he refused to classify clinic bombings as arson or terrorism. And Reagan refused to condemn clinic bombings at all. So it's a little tie-in for you, Scott, that we were not particularly concerned about these issues either because of judgments about the behaviors of the people that were getting help. So.
Well, and then I added onto it, and Abby, I don't even have to say it because Abby said it, toxic masculinity.
Yeah, capital T, capital M.
It's patriarchy, it is toxic masculinity, and it is like, and I just wish people would look historically. Like, this wasn't, while abortion has always been looked at differently at different times in, the last 200 years, every time it's always about controlling women. That's all it's about, is controlling women. And and then if all we have to do is point towards the successes of Colorado. Colorado implemented human sexuality and sex education in their high schools, made access to birth control more easy without parental, and teen pregnancy and teen abortion just bottomed out. So why can't we get on? If we really want abortions to go away, there's ways to actually make it happen, but bombing clinics is not going to be the way to do it.
If they just want to control us, we're all just going to end up like Carol one day in The Walking Dead. So
yeah,
beware.
I wouldn't want to mess with Carol. I love that there was a T-shirt that was it was brief. I should have bought it, but like Carol's cookies. Don't tell anyone. There's secret.
Oh yeah,
Remember,
yeah.
Because she was like, she was messing with that little kid, the one that had a breakdown. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Carol's cookies. All right, you want to take the next one?
Let me get to that. Oh yeah.
By Quesadilla.
Quesadilla.
Oh, Quesadilla.
I would have mispronounced that. So Quesadilla says, I'm listening to the Dream podcast, which is an in-depth look at the world of MLMs, which is multi-level marketing. I totally recommend it. Great podcast. Quesadilla, I completely agree with you. It is such a tight podcast. It's really interesting. The host is fantastic, and everybody should listen to it. To me, joining an MLM sounds really similar to joining a cult. What is your professional opinions on MLMs, and would by comparison be correct? I haven't listened to your California cults episode in full, so I apologize if it's gone way over. No. So I would say that that it dovetails or parallels cults in like 90%. The difference is that MLMs don't necessarily surround one particular person as being the penultimate, like the person who says what's going on. That is, a cult does that, but an MLM doesn't. So Mary Kay, I don't even know if the real Mary Kay is still around anymore, but she's there is a corporation in her name, whereas cults really are all about like an individual who has complete control that they then, disperse responsibilities to their sort of lieutenants around. And, the thing that I would add to it that I think is very interesting is that what MLMs do in this country is that they appeal to this really twisted Western ideology of financial success and rugged individualism. So the cults are selling that they have the answer to all of your spiritual questions, to all of your questions about being a realized individual. MLMs are telling you that we have the answer to make your life a success, and it's all money.
Yep.
And it's just such a simple formula. All you have to do is do what we say. And then both of them usually require like tons of commitment and tons of money. Basically all your money gets diverted to these ends.
And both of them, the more money or effort or energy you put in, the greater the rewards, right? So, I mean, supposedly, supposedly, but that seems to be a house of cards in a sense.
It is. I mean, it just doesn't work. And, you're not even allowed to call things a pyramid scheme anymore because, and I encourage everybody to go listen to it because that podcast, it breaks it down, all of these court cases and how, because you just, on one hand, you go, how is it even possible that these kind of organizations are allowed to exist legally? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And then she explains to you how they were able to carve out in the legal system over years and years and maintain their power. My theory on this, as somebody who is, a professional in the area of observing and analyzing human behavior, is that, so bear with me for a second because this is going to sound mean. And I don't mean to be mean. I think it's just a reflection on the human condition, is that people in the US are generally wildly unaware of their intellectual and creative limits. Not everybody is an artist. Not everybody is a genius. Not everybody can play the stock market. Like on my YouTube feed, when I'm trying to watch, because I don't subscribe to YouTube, but I watch a lot of videos and listen to a lot of music and stuff. And so they have a lot of advertisements. And right now, the main thing that gets sent to me is all of these doughy, pasty guys telling me, trying to convince me in their bad Costco shirt, and I can say that because I wear Costco shirts, and their bad haircuts, and they're just looking in the screen, trying to tell me that they have the formula that's going to make me a millionaire.
Yeah.
And, everybody's trying to get into that. Like, this is the way you do it through real estate, or this is how you do it through, competing with Amazon and Alibaba, and it's all bullshit.
Right.
And I just think that people are really unaware of what their limits are and what they think they can do. And
sorry, Shannon put MLM splaining.
Yes. Oh yeah, no, yeah, did a great job.
Yeah.
So I think, part of the extension of that question or that answer of like, well, okay, so people really overestimate their abilities. Why is that? And I think that we really have a culture right now, especially through social media influencers and TikTokers, people just thinking they're going to make a quick buck, that personal and practical insight into who we are has really been subsumed by extremes, either very flat, superficial, limited understanding and very entitled views of like, well, I've put up 10 TikTok videos. Why shouldn't I be making 100,000 a year?
Right.
Or on the other end, and I know I'm going to get flack for this, really super entrenched self-help victim mentality that gets spoon-fed by the other extremes of pop psychology and self-help. I just think that there's a type of person that is drawn to either of those extremes, and the people who do that don't have a lot of insight and are not necessarily interested in just tolerating the distress of not having insight. It takes a lot for us, and this is like in here, I'm going to save you guys 3 years of therapy if you're in therapy. Sit down on a regular basis with yourself and say, what am I not looking at? What do I need to become aware of about my behaviors, my interactions, my perspective on the world that's holding me back?
Mm-hmm.
So there, I just saved you everything that Tony Robbins is going to try and tell you.
And curtain. Very good. Very nice.
No, but you gave an example too, because I was saying that it's an example of they keep selling you, be your own boss, make your own hours, be an entrepreneur. Nobody's going to tell you blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And you were like talking about that whole boss babe ethic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just the money they're making on crap that says boss babe, like the fake little, desk nameplate. Like, here's mine. But instead, should it say boss babe on it?
No. I love it. It's perfect as it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's everywhere, especially with social media. So, but it's very simple mathematics. And if you're saturating a market and if everyone's doing it on social media, it sounds super easy, but everyone's doing it. So yeah, Joel from Florida Men says, start a podcast. You'll be rolling in money. But wait, I put out 75 episodes. Shouldn't I be able to quit my job by now? Just kidding. Don't care about that. Okay. I think we can fit in one more, and this was a fun one. This is the last question. This is from Bridget, Patreon member. Says, what trope about psychologists or mental illness used in movies and TV annoys you the most? Conversely, what fictional portrayal of a psychologist or mental illness is the most accurate? Okay, so it was very easy for me to come up with the one that annoys me the most. So I will talk about the depictions of law enforcement psychologists, and I think I've been on this soapbox before, so I apologize if you've heard this one. So it's one of two things. You have that poor, all the time frazzled woman from Lethal Weapon, who is just like terrified of what the cops are doing. And I get it. It's Mel Gibson and he's crazy and like, you don't know what he's going to do next. But that poor woman just is like a ball of anxiety all the time. And I think it's ridiculous. Why would she be doing that job? Okay.
Right.
But
you wouldn't last. No. Possible. You wouldn't last doing the job.
No. You have to deal with all sorts of personalities. But the trope that I just lost it or lose it with is depicted in The Departed. Great movie. Love everyone in it.
Vera Farmiga. Love her. Boy, that pissed me off.
So not only is she ends up sleeping with one of her clients, but she's just writing prescriptions out because Leonardo DiCaprio is basically bullying her into giving him medication.
Yeah, so she's like, okay, what do you want to do for her?
Okay, like it's like this weird pissing contest where she's trying to like stand up to this cop, but ends up being manipulated and giving in. It just completely irks me like crazy. And then it was even more watered down in the TV show 911, where I think it was a firefighter, but he has a really traumatic critical incident that he's involved in. And he goes to his debriefing with the psychologist. And I was like, okay, like this is cool. Like it's kind of talk about mental health and awareness. And what happens? They start boning right in her office. Like they cannot keep their hands off each other. And I was just like, no. I think I took to Twitter and I was like, shame on you, Fox, whoever's putting out this show. But I don't know. It's just like, really?
I think it has to do, that particular thing may have to do with, for what, like the field of psychology, at least at this time in history, is heavily dominated by women, even in the research areas and certainly very comprehensively in the clinical area. And I remember as a dancer, I went through this, is that you, on one hand, people would take you seriously when they saw you do concert work and they would think, like, oh, this is really great. Like, what an amazing thing. Look, all that training. When are you going to get a real job?
Yeah.
And that's what I would get. But my female colleagues would always be sexualized in a way. It's like, no, they're not doing this to turn you on to. This is an art form.
Yeah.
And I just think it's another way that writers, particularly male writers, will, because they're talking about the masculine paradigm and masculine ideology is that men don't talk about their feelings.
Right.
So the only way they're going to talk about their feelings is if they end up fucking.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But it's obviously problematic, and as somebody who's worked in a male dominated field for a very long time, whether colleagues or clientele, obviously just like hugely problematic. So what about you? Any tropes on psychologists or mental illness?
Well, I have to. I don't think my sister-in-law is watching, but she listens to this. But her favorite one is Good Will Hunting. And she's convinced that we either dissed Good Will Hunting in our first episode.
No, because I was going to talk about that as my next point.
Because look, there are boundaries that are crossed, but this is something that it's very hard to, because we, especially Shiloh and I talk about like how important boundaries are with clients and having ethics and morals and following the legal requirements of your profession. But this is a science and an art of interpersonal relationships and creating, and sometimes there is diffusion or fluidity between client and clinician. Yeah. And in Good Will Hunting, here's this broken guy who is such an outsider and has no sort of solid family paradigm or dynamic from which to springboard into this really amazing potential in his life. And he's sabotaging himself. So Robin Williams, as that clinician, really does start, like he has some pretty poor boundaries. Or does he? Does he specifically find the right time to relate when he can get through to this young man?
Yeah, it totally, like, that's what I jotted down for the fictional portrayal that she says most accurate, I think is kind of most maybe ideal. And if we could peek behind the curtain, would be the most real, because you get to actually see Robin Williams' backstory and see how broken he is too. And the way that he is just like equal parts empathy and tough and supportive when he has to be, meeting the needs of this client. And I just love it, because my favorite clients are the clients that don't want to be there. The ones that are, whether I'm working with parolees or whether I'm working with cops, like who got sent to me and who doesn't want to be there, and how can we figure out together why you should be there, and then start doing the work like that. That's my favorite thing ever. So I think that's why it's more my favorite portrayal, perhaps. But yeah, even my bosses now are like, oh, we have a directed client. And I was like, bring them on. I'm your person. So
there's another one for an even older movie that is really great, is Ordinary People, where Judd Nelson plays Timothy something, plays his therapist. And it's really a great portrayal of a fucked up family dynamic with there's a death of a sibling. Mary Tyler Moore plays a narcissist, like a narcissistic mom that was enmeshed with her other son and treats her surviving son like shit. And Judd Hirsch is like the pre Robin Williams, the pre Good Will Hunting version of that kind of relationship, and does a great job. Those are great examples.
If you guys haven't listened, or you want to go back when we were baby podcasters, what was it, like episode 6 or something, we talked about therapists represented in entertainment. We talk about like some hilarious ones and some good ones. I think you touched on Ordinary People in that one. But that was a fun episode.
The worst of all is still Bruce Willis in Color of Night.
Night.
So awful.
It's just an awful movie.
It's a terrible movie.
terrible, terrible trash from the 80s, but hey, what are you going to do? All right. Well, all of those questions were from our Patreon members. A special thank you to every one of you that decides to join Patreon and be a part of our tribe. It's so fun to be able to send out new mail every month and just do a little handwritten card saying thank you to you guys, because it means the world. We've been working on some new stuff, and hopefully we'll get back to doing some more fun things with you guys, a watch party here or there.
Yes.
But we just appreciate you. So I just want to say an extra special thank you. And we always have someone join after a Get Vocal, which is nice. Like the hour afterwards, I'm like, oh, we got a new person. That's so sweet.
So cool. And please take a chance, peruse through our new website. Like I was saying at the beginning, I can't believe it's so much more than we expected. What we got from Rachel, who's wonderful. And please share it on social media. Like, hey, check out my favorite podcast new website. We really appreciate it.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, guys. All right, well, we will see you later on Behind the Couch in a couple of weeks. And I guess next week, that means we have to have a new LA Not So Confidential episode out, right? What will it be?
What will it be?
All right, you guys, take care. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.